Regardless of whether you think tariffs are a brilliant way for the US to take back control or a reckless act of economic vandalism, one thing is clear: the world is in a state of flux. The headlines have faded, but the shockwaves haven't. The global system, trade, finance, diplomacy, is shifting beneath our feet. And whether you cheer the tariffs or fear them, they're triggering changes that go far beyond borders and prices. Markets are still wobbling, long-standing alliances are fraying, and behind it all, the people meant to steer the system appear to be grasping for control, not exercising it. Tariffs may be intended to fix trade, but they're accelerating the breakdown of something much bigger: trust, the invisible currency that keeps the whole system functioning. It's tempting to see tariffs as a blunt instrument, a relic of a more combative era. But the truth is more nuanced. For a country that habitually overinvests and underconsumes, think China, well, tariffs can be a poison pill. They exacerbate existing imbalances, pushing even more capital into unproductive investments while suppressing the very consumption that could rebalance the system. What I'm saying is that tariffs make China's problems worse, and here's why. China already spends too much on building things like factories and infrastructure, and not enough on letting its people buy things. When tariffs hit, China tries to protect its factories by building even more, instead of encouraging people to spend. This means money keeps going into projects that don't really help ordinary people, while the average person still can't buy as much as they'd like. So instead of fixing the problem, tariffs just make it bigger. The result is a deepening of the structural divide, not its resolution. China's best move would be to lower its own barriers, to let its citizens spend more freely on imports, and to allow the benefits of global trade to flow inward. If China made it easier for its people to buy goods from other countries, it would help balance things out. But instead, China is doing the opposite, putting up more barriers and digging in its heels, which just makes the standoff worse. Right now, the current path is one of entrenchment, not adaptation. The United States has the opposite problem to China. For years, America has spent more money buying things from other countries than it has earned by selling its own goods. It's like a family that keeps buying new trendy gadgets, but never saves up enough to fix the house or buy the tools. As a result, America's factories have closed, and the country relies on imports for almost everything. In this context, tariffs can, in theory, redirect dollars from consumption to investment, nudging capital back into domestic production. Factories may rise behind tariff walls, and consumer spending may well shift, at least temporarily, towards savings and higher wage jobs. But this is not a panacea. The transition is wrenching, and the system these tariffs are acting on is already under immense strain. But here's the first paradox. America's financial power, i.e., its ability to print the world's reserve currency, depends on openness, not isolation. The dollar's dominance is built on the US running trade deficits, sending dollars abroad in exchange for those goods. If tariffs work and those deficits shrink, the global supply of dollars contracts. In trying to protect itself, America risks eroding the very privilege that has underwritten its prosperity for decades. Fortress America and dollar supremacy are, in the end, mutually exclusive. Let me break this down for those of you at the back. America's financial superpower is the dollar as the global reserve currency. And this is only the case because America buys so much from other countries. When the US buys goods, it pays in dollars, and those dollars spread around the world. If America puts up tariffs and buys less, fewer dollars go overseas. And that means the world has fewer dollars to use, and the dollar's special status is at risk. And of course, this means fewer dollars to lend back to the US to fund the budget deficits. I repeat, America's strength comes from being open and trading with everyone. If it tries to close itself off, it loses the very thing that makes it powerful. You can't have a fortress America and a world where everyone wants your dollars at the same time. They just don't go together. Moving factories and supply chains is not like snapping together some Lego bricks. It took decades for manufacturing to move from the US to China, and China is now decades ahead in skills and infrastructure. You can't just flip a switch and bring those jobs back. For example, China has so many skilled toolmakers that they estimate that they could fill 3 football stadiums. In the US, you probably barely fill a room because they just haven't needed those skills in the last few decades. Rebuilding that kind of expertise takes years, maybe even generations. The people trying to reshore production forgot that you can't rebuild a complex global system with press conferences. The tools are gone. The talent is gone. The trust is gone. What's left is the fantasy of control and the very real cost of chasing it. Companies are scrambling to adapt, rerouting orders, stockpiling inventory, and revising earnings expectations downwards. The effects are already visible. Inventories are rising, new orders are falling, and capital spending plans are being shelved. Consumers sensing the uncertainty are front-loading purchases and pulling back on those discretionary spends. Confidence is fragile, and the psychological impact is as real as the economic one. This is not just a story of economics, it's a story of worldviews. For decades, the liberal order was built on the premise that cooperation could yield this mutual benefit, that the world was not a zero-sum game. International institutions, global supply chains, and shared rules were the scaffolding of prosperity. But the Trumpian vision, now in its second act, sees the world as a mosaic of fortresses. Every transaction is a contest, every agreement a potential trap. And in this worldview, strength is the only currency, and the weak are expected to yield. The result is a world of walls, financial, cultural, and physical, where trust is scarce and every nation is left to fend for itself. But here's the deeper critique. The more governments try to control this hyper-connected world, the more they expose its fragility. Tariffs and trade barriers are meant to give policymakers more leverage, but in a world of just-in-time supply chains and digital capital flows, control is largely an illusion. A single policy change can ripple through thousands of suppliers, disrupt entire industries, and trigger unintended consequences like shortages, inflation, or even social unrest. The system is too complex for top-down management, yet the political instinct is to double down on control. The psychological toll of this shift is really profound. The surprise, if there is any left, is not in the policies themselves, but in the persistence of disbelief. The pattern is clear. The old order is being dismantled, not by accident, but very much by design. The liberal vision of a cooperative network is being replaced by a landscape of rival fortresses. The short-term results are trade wars, arm races, and a scramble for strategic advantage. The long-term risks are deeper: global conflict, ecological collapse, and the unchecked rise of technologies that no single nation really has any control of. In this environment, the response of firms and consumers is telling. Companies are revising earnings downward, freezing hiring, and building up inventories in anticipation of further shocks. Consumers are saving more, they're traveling less, and bracing for those shortages. And the timeline from tariff to recession is no longer theoretical. Shipping has slowed, trucking demand has dried up, and layoffs are beginning to ripple through the retail and logistics sectors. The spectre of recession is no longer a distant threat. It's a present reality, unfolding very much in real time. And while all this is happening, the US is losing its place in global trade. China isn't just waiting around. They're buying beef from Australia and soybeans from Brazil instead of the US. Even if tariffs are lifted later, those old relationships may not come back. The damage is done, and the US may find that it's been replaced in markets it used to dominate. Yet, for all the focus on tariffs, the deeper crisis is one of liquidity and trust. The Federal Reserve, once the architect of global monetary stability, now finds itself increasingly irrelevant beyond the shortest end of the yield curve. The US national debt really is unmanageable, and the only path to sustainability is through growth that outpaces the accumulation of new debt, a virtuous circle that is more aspiration than reality. Meanwhile, a global dollar shortage is morphing into a full-blown liquidity crisis. China is not selling treasuries to distance itself from the dollar, but out of necessity. Dollars are scarce and the need for cash is acute. European banks are struggling to fund in Eurodollars and the US hedge funds are scrambling for collateral. The best description of a financial crisis remains the simplest. Everyone wants their money back. We are dangerously close to that tipping point right now. Trust used to be what held the global system together. Now it is being used as a weapon. When the US freezes another country's assets or threatens to cut off access to the global banking system, like SWIFT, well, that sends a clear message. Your money is only safe if you do what we say. And this makes other countries nervous. They start looking around for ways to protect themselves, buying gold, trading directly with one another, or even creating new digital currencies. Russia, for example, sold off a lot of US treasuries before the Ukraine war, just in case. Countries like Taiwan are watching closely, wondering if they could be next. The more the US uses its financial power to control others, the more the world tries to find ways around it. Ray Dalio's recent warning is clear. The time for calm, coordinated rebalancing is slipping away. The world is moving beyond the ideal moment to plan for these changes. The risk is not just economic, but systemic. The breakdown of the monetary order, the fraying of domestic politics, and the unraveling of international alliances. The United States, once the indispensable nation, is being bypassed as countries and corporations build new networks that exclude it. The assumption that one can always sell to the US and be paid in hard, undiluted dollars is no longer credible. The imbalances are too large and the trust is too eroded. Trump's approach, for all his bravado, taps into a real and growing frustration. The sense that globalization has hollowed out domestic industries and weakened national self-reliance. But while the diagnosis may well be accurate, the prescription is very unclear. A world of rival fortresses may feel like strength, but history tells us that it often breeds instability. Wars don't eliminate competition, they intensify it. Without reliable global frameworks, disputes are resolved not through consensus, but through confrontation. This isn't about one administration or one leader. It's about a broader shift that was well on the move before Trump's inauguration, from cooperation to coercion, from systems to silos. And in a century where the biggest threats, from climate volatility to AI, don't respect borders, retreating behind them carries its own risks. Strategic resilience is vital, but pretending complex global challenges can be managed with isolationist tools alone, that is not a strategy. That's wishful thinking. So what is the strategy now? Clamp down, threaten, sanction, tariff, control. But control isn't a strategy, it's a reaction. And that's what we're watching, a system reacting to its own unsustainability, not fixing it, not reforming it, just reacting. And with every move, the instability deepens. What does that leave you, the individual, to do? Simple. Don't try to fix their system. Prepare for its failure. You don't need the Fed's timeline or the Treasury's reassurance. You need resilience. And you need an exit plan, which handily, we have one right here for you to download for free. Gold isn't just a commodity, it's a contingency, and it's all part of this exit plan. It sits outside the system because it was never part of the illusion in the first place. The old order is gone. The new one, that's not ready. And in between, there's gold. So get your exit ready.